Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today we will see the in a machine learning the Navy bias theorem. Okay, we will learn last in our last two sessions as a logistic regression and linear regression. But today we will see the machine learning, one of the most important rapidly growing features and the best output regarding as the algorithm as a Navy bias. Okay. Then we will see the agenda of this today's session is the introduction of machine learning, overview of the classification algorithm, introduction to a Navy bias, bias theorem, Navy bias formula, working, type of Navy bias algorithm, example of Navy bias classification, then advantage and disadvantage, application the Navy bias. We will see it. What is the introduction of machine learning? Machine learning is the branch of artificial intelligence. Machine learning has become a core part of artificial intelligence, and it is a transforming become a core part of artificial intelligence, and it's transforming how computers solve problem, make prediction, and exit of human. So being with a let's understand what the machine learning actually is. The being to a let's understand what machine learning actually. The machine learning is obtained and observable machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence that focus on a building system that can be learned from a data instead of being explicitly programmed. Traditionally, the computers where a perform program is a strict rule. For example, if we want to program to recognize a spam or not spam. The strict rule, for example, if we wanted the program to recognize the spam emails, would you manually define the rules like a checking certain keywords such as a lottery, free money, urgent offers, and however this is based on. The machine learning solve the problems by allowing a computer to learn patterns automatically from data. Instead of writing every rule manually, we provide the computers with a large amount of data. And the algorithms patterns and relationship within the data over time, the system improves its performance at its process more data. In a simple term, machine learning can be defined as a technique where computers learn from past data and make prediction or decision without being explicitly programmed for every task. Why the machine learning is important? Machine learning has become extremely important because in a huge growth of data, every data enormous amount of large data generated through the smartphones, social media platform, websites, sensor and digital transaction. Humans alone cannot analyze the such massive amount of data effectively. Machine learning algorithm help organization and research analyze data quickly, detect a pattern and make accurate prediction. Because of this capability, machine learning is now used in a many industries such as healthcare, finance, e-commerce, education, transform, and cybersecurity. Okay. The real world application in machine learning is used. First one is the email spam detection. One of the earliest and most common application of machine learning is the email spam detection. Every day, billions of emails are sent worldwide. Many of these emails are spam messages that contain advertisements and scams or a malicious content. Email is a services like email and Gmail and the Outlook use a machine learning algorithm to automatically detect and filter the spam emails. The algorithm analyzes pattern in the email such as the word used in a subject and messages, the sender addresses, the frequency of the certain keywords and previous user behavior. Based on this pattern, the system classifies the email into spam, not spam categories. As user make emails as a spam or not spam, the system continuously learn and improve its accuracy. Second one is the recommendation system. Another very popular example of the machine learning is the recommendation system. Recommendation system are used by the platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, YouTube, and Spotify. This system analyzes user behavior and preference to suggest a products, movies, videos, or song that the users might like. For example, when you watch movie on Netflix, it recommended similar movie. When you stop on Amazon, it suggests a product related to your previous purchase. Correct? When you watch the video on YouTube, it's a recommended other videos based on your interest. Machine learning algorithm analyze factors such as past user activity, viewing history, rating and review behavior of similar users. Using this pattern, the system predicts that what user might prefer in the future. Medical diagnosis, machine learning is also making a huge impact on healthcare sector. Doctor and research use a machine learning algorithm to help detect disease and analyze a medical data. For example, machine learning can assist in a diagnosis conditions such as the cancer, heart disease, diabetes, brain tumor. In a medical image, the machine learning model can analyze X-ray, CT scan, MRI image to detect abnormalities. This system helps doctor identify disease and earlier and more accurately. In addition, machine learning can analyze the patient records and predict a potential health risks, which help the doctor make for better treatment decision. The fourth one is the sentimental analysis. Another interesting application of the machine learning is the sentimental analysis. Sentimental analysis is the process of the determining the whether a piece of the text express a positive and negative or neutral opinion. Companies often use a sentimental analysis to understand the customer opinion about their product or services. For example, analyze a product review on a e-commerce website, studying a comments on social media and platform, evaluating a customer feedback. In a many customer express negative opinion about a product, the company can identify the issue and improve the product. The machine learning algorithm analyze the text data, identify the pattern in language, and determine the emotional tone of the content. Okay. One of the simplest and most efficient classification algorithm is the navy bar. Because of the type of machine learning is the supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement learning. The supervised is the label data, and the unsupervised is the unlabeled data, not the content labels, and reinforcement is the based on the learning through interaction and the feedback. Okay. What is the next one? We will see what is the Navy bias theorem. Now let's understand the focus on the simplest and most efficient classification algorithm in machine learning known as a Navy bias algorithm. Navy bias is a probabilities classification algorithm on the based on bias theorem. It is called as a Navy because it is assumed that all features are independent of each other, which is strong but simplifying assumption. Even though this assumption may not always be true in the real world data, the algorithm often performs surprisingly well in many applications. The Navy Bayes algorithm calculates the probability that give data points belong to a particular class. It then assigns the data points to the class with the highest probability. Okay. Navy Bayes is one of the most popular, but it belongs to a family of probabilities algorithms, which means it is working by calculating for probabilities to make prediction and classification. In simple terms, Navy Bayes algorithm predict the probability that gives the data point belong to a particular classes. After calculating these probabilities, the algorithm assigns the data point to the class with the highest probability. For example, suppose we want to classify emails as the spam and not spam. The Navy Bayes algorithm examines the word present in the email and calculates the probability that the emails belong to the spam category or the non-spam category. This class with the higher probabilities becomes the final prediction. Because of its simplicity and efficiency, the Navy bias is a widely used in a text classification, sentiment analysis, document categorization, and a spam filtering system. Navy bias and bias theorem. The Navy bias algorithm is based on the important concept in probability, the theory known as the bias theorem. Bias theorem is describes how we can calculate the probability of event based on a prior knowledge of a condition related to that event in order. Other words, it helps us update or a prediction when a new information become available. The mathematical formula for a bias theorem is P A gives B equals to P B gives A into P A upon PB. The probability of this formula we will event A gives the event B. P upon BA is the probability of P given event A, and A is the prior probability and B is the prior probability of event. Why it is called as a Navy? The algorithm is called as a Navy bias because it makes a very strong and simple assumption all features are independent of each other. In a real world situation, the features are often related to each other. For example, in email classification, word appearing in a sentence are usually related in meaning. However, the Navy bias assumes that each feature contributes independently to the final prediction. Even though this assumption is not always true, the algorithm still perform a surprisingly well in a many practical applications. This adoption simplifies the calculation and make the algorithm very fast and efficient. How the Navy bias is works. The Navy bias algorithm is a few simple steps to perform a classification. First, algorithm analyze the training data and probability to each other. Okay. Bias theorem. Understanding the bias theorem, the mathematical foundations, the Navy bias algorithms, it is come from the field of probability, probability theory, and it is used to determine the probability of an event based on the previously known information. In machine learning classification problem, bias theorem help us to predict the class of new data using a past data. The formula of the bias theorem is P A gives B equals to P. B gives A into P A B upon B A. This formula calculates the probability of event A occurring due that event B has the occurred. Understanding each component of the formula. To understand how this theorem works, and let's break down each part of the formula. Posterior probability P A gives B. To understand how this theorem works, let's break down each part of the formula. Posterior probability PA up gives B. The posterior probability is the final probability we want to calculate. It is represent the probability of event happening after considering event B. For example, imagine we are building a spam email classifier. Event A could represent the email being a spam. Event B could represent the email containing certain words like free or a discount. So PA gives B means the probability that an email is a spam gives that it contains certain words. This is the result the Navy bias algorithm tries to compute. Likelihood P A gives A. This likelihood represents the probability of the observing the evidence of the hypothesis is true. In the other words, it is a measures how likely we are to observe the data if the class is correct. Continuing the spam emails example, PBA means the probability that an email contains word like free or offer gives that the email is actually spam. If the spam emails is frequently contain this word, this probability will be high. The third one is the prior probability. It is a PA. This is a prior probability of the data. Prior, prior probability PA is the probability event A before observing any evidence. It is a reflect our initial belief about the initial belief of the likelihood of an event. For example, if in a data set 40% of email are spam, 60% of emails are not a spam, then the prior probability of the spam is a zero point 0.4. This means that before analyzing any word in the email, we already know that the 40% of the email are spam. Evidence P and B. The evidence represent the probability of the observing the data regarding of the class. In the spam example, PB means the probability that an email contains certain word like free offer, whether the email is spam or not spam. Evidence act as a normalized factor ensure the probability values remain valid. Simple example of bias theorem. Simple example of bias theorem. 40% of the emails are spam and the P spam 0.4. The 60% of emails are not spam is the P not spam 0.6. Also, suppose the 70% of the spam emails contain the word free, the 10% of the normal emails contain the word free. If you knew emails contains the word is a free and bias theorem help us to calculate the probability that email is the spam. This the probability algorithm is compared to the probabilities for the both classes choose the higher probability. This is exactly how the Navy bias classification works. Simple example of the bias theorem. Why the bias theorem is important? The bias theorem is extremely important because the machine learning because it allows the systems update the prediction when new data is arrived, work efficient, work efficiently with probabilities, handle uncertain information, and make a prediction based on the past knowledge. The second one is the Navy bias in machine learning. The Navy bias of the machine learning is the Navy bias extend to bias theorem and two that it can work with the multiple features at the same time. In most real most real world data sets, a data point does not have just one feature, it has many attributes or variables. Navy bias is the bias theorem to calculate probability consider all these features together. The formula used in a Navy bias classification is C for a class label, X for the feature vector set of feature, P probability of C gives X is the posterior probability of class C gives feature X. P probability of X gives C the likelihood of observing features X gives class C. P gives P probability of C is the prior probability of class C and P probability of X is the evidence probability of the future X. This formula helps to determine which class gives the data points most likely belong to. Understand the component class label C. This is the class label is a represent the category we want to predict. For example, in a spam detection system, the possible classes could be spam, not spam. In a sentimental analysis system, the classes might be positive, negative, and neutral. The algorithm calculates the probability for each class and the select the one of the highest probability. Features vector is the features vector is the collection of input feature describing the data. For example, the email classification features could include presence of the word free, presence of the word discount, length of the email, and number of the links in the email. These features together from the features vector X. So instead of the analyzing just one feature, the algorithm analyzing many features simultaneously. So instead of the analyzing just one feature, the algorithm evaluates many features simultaneously. What is the called navy? Is the navy is a bias? I assume that the features are independent of each other. For example, if an email contains the word free or for pizza, the algorithm assumes that the presence of the one word does not affect the probability of the another word appearing. In reality, world in a sense are often related. However, this simplifying assumption makes the algorithm much faster and easier to compute, which is why it is called as a navy. Despite this assumption, the navy bias perform surprisingly well in many practical situations, especially in the text classification task. How to the types of the navy bias theorem. In the machine learning, the navy bias algorithm can implement different ways depending on the types of the data being used. Different data sets have a different characteristics. Some data sets can contain some data sets can contain a different data sets and depending on the different characteristics. Some data sets are the contain of the continuous numerical values which other contains a text and binary features. They handle this difference is a navy bias is commonly divided into three main types. First is the Gaussian navy bias. Second is the multinomial navy bias. Bernoulli's navy bias, and each type of the design to work with the specific kind of the data. We will see the first is the Gaussian navy bias. This is used to features the continuous numerical values. The continuous data means that values can take any number within the range, such as the decimal number. This method assumes that the one data followed by a normal distribution. To the data form of the bell curve shape, where most values are concentrated around the average. Suppose we are building a model to predict whether a point, so this is based on the data and the media measures such as the body temperature, blood pressure, cholesterol levels, and a heart rate. This value is the conditional numbers. Navy calculate the probabilities using the assumption that the feature follows is a normal distribution. Application of the Gaussian Navy bias is commonly used in medical diagnosis system weather prediction, risk prediction modes, because it works well with the numerical and a continuous task. The multinomial Navy bias is used to the mainly for the text classification problem in the text data. The algorithms is the frequent words appearing to the document instead of the simply checking and the whether a word is exist. How many words the word appears? Consider a spam email classifier multinomial Navy bias theorem count. How often this word appear in an email and use their frequencies to determine whether the email is spam or not spam. Application: the multinomial Navy bias is widely used in email spam detection, sentiment analysis, and new article classification, document categorization, and because text data sets often rely on the word is the count and frequency. The Bernoulli Navy bias is the used to the features are binary and meaning they have only two possible values. The values are the typically represent as 1 and 0. Features is represent and 0 is the features is absent. Unlike the multinomial Navy bias, is the Bernoulli Navy bias only check the whether a feature exists or not. How many times it appears? Example: suppose we are analyzing email or checking whether the certain words are be present. The free one, discount 0 and price is 1. Here the algorithm only care how the presence or absence, not frequently. Applications of the Bernoulli is the often in the simply text classification, spam detection models, and also the final feature detection. There is the types of the three or types of the Navy bias type is the Gaussian Navy bias, multinomial, and Bernoulli Navy bias. Continuous numerical data, text data, binary data. The working of the Navy bias is we will see how to working with the Navy bias, and we will see the step by step of the working. Okay. First is the calculate the prior probability of the data and use it for each class. The Navy bias algorithm classify method machine learning that use bias theorem to predict the class of new data. It is working to calculate the probabilities for each possibility class and then selecting the class with the highest probabilities. Step by step process. Calculating the prior probability. The first step is to calculate the prior probability for each class. The prior probability is the representing how often each class occurs in the dataset before considering the input features. For example, in a email dataset, the 40% of the emails are spam and the 60% of the email is the not spam. So the prior probabilities are P scan is a zero point 0.4, P not scan is a zero point 0.6. This probabilities gives the algorithm an initial belief about the each class. Calculate the likelihood of each feature. Next, the algorithm calculates the likelihood, which means the probability of each feature and occurring gives a specific class. For example, the probability that the word free is the appearance in spam email. The probability that the word is a win is the appearance in spam email. And the probability that the word price is appearing in spam email. This algorithm calculates the probability for each data and the step of this determining to strongly indicate the particular. Third one is the multi-probability. And after calculating the prior probability and likelihood values, the algorithm multiples the probability together. This step follows the formula of Navy bias where the probabilities are using to class gives the features is calculated. Because of the independent assumption, the algorithm multiplies the probability of and all features together. For example, P spam and feature P win and spam into P free spam into P size price of a spam into spam. This calculator gives the overall probability that email is belonging to the spam class, and this same calculation is performed to the not spam class. The fourth one is to choose the class for with the highest probability. Finally, understand the algorithm compare the probabilities of all the classes. This class will the highest probability is achieved to the final probabilities and the plan method is called as a machine probability, maximum probability of decision rules. For example, the email classification, let's understand, consider the sample, simple example, input win free size pizza. The price is free, free price. The system must, the system must decide, the system must decide whether the email is spam is. The not spam. First step is identify the features. The features are the word win the free price. The calculate the probability is the calculate the probability and the appearance of the spam email. The probability word appearing in non-spam emails. Computer class probabilities. This model is a multiples and used to probability for each class. It is a simple to implement, work well to the large data sets, and it is a very fast to the classification, perform the especially well to the text classification. This is the why Navy bias. Bias is widely used in applications such as the email spam filtering. Okay. Advantage and disadvantages of the Navy bias. First one is the advantages of Navy bias algorithm in machine learning. The Navy bias algorithm is one of the most widely and classifying algorithm in machine learning. It is popular because of the simplicity, efficiency, and good performance in many practical applications. It is easy, especially in text-related problems, and below are some of the major advantages of Navy bias algorithm. Simple and easy to implement. One of the biggest advantages Navy bias is the very simple understand implementation. The algorithm of the bias theorem, which uses the probability, of the calculation to make the prediction because of the formula of the logical straightforward. It is easier for beginners and research to implementation the algorithm. Unlike the some more complex machine learning model, the Navy bias does not unique completion. The mathematical completion of the deep learning architecture, the simplicity makes it great, starting from the learning classification algorithm. Second one is the work well with the large data sets. Navy bias perform very well when dealing with the large data sets. In a many real-world applications such as email filtering or social media analysis, the system must process millions of the data points. Navy bias can handle such large data sets efficiently without requiring excessive computational power. Because it relies on a probability calculation rather than complex optimization process, it can scale easily to large amount of the data. Fast training and prediction. The similarly during prediction, the second one is a perform well in text classification. Naibice is especially effective and is for a text classifier task. The text classification involves a categorical text documentation into the different categories based on their content. Example include email spam, product, new article categories, and social media comment analysis. Requires less training data the compared to the many others machine learning algorithms. Navy bias requires less training data to perform a well. Many complex models need very large data sets to learn accurate patterns, and however, the Navy bias can still produce reasonable and result even through the smaller data sets. Conclusion that the Navy bias algorithms offer several important advantages. It is a simple, fast, and effective making it's suitable for many machine learning tasks. Second one is the disadvantages of the Navy bias applications. Assume of features independent, not always true, zero probability problem, and sometimes less accurate the complex data. Applications of the Navy bias. The Navy bias is used in a real world problems to solve the predictions. It is widely used in many real world applications because of the simplicity, efficiency, and strong performance, especially with the text data and classification tasks. Below, with some of the day application where Navy bias is play important. Email spam detection. One of the most important famous application of the Navy bias is the email spam filtering. Email services like Gmail and Outlook we Navy bias theorem to analyze incoming emails and classify them as spam is the unwanted suspicious emails and not spam is the legitimate email. By looking of the presence of the frequency, certain words and the phrase, the algorithm predict the whether an email is a spam or not spam. Second one, sentiment analysis. The Navy bias is heavily used in a sentiment analysis, whether it's classified text based on the emotional tone expressed. The business is a useful sentiment analysis to analyze customer reviews, social media comments, and product feedback. This algorithm helps you determine whether the sentiment is positive, negative, and neutral. Third one is the document classification. Navy bias is used to automatically organize document into categories. Example include news articles sorted into topics such as sport, politics, and technology. Legal document category by the game and the academic paper grouped by the research area. The fourth one is a medical diagnosis. The next bias is applied in a medical diagnosis system to predict the disease based on the symptoms and the patient data. For example, it is can analyze medical tests such as the result predict to the likelihood of cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Recommendation systems. Navy bias can also be a part of the recommendation system. These that suggest the product movie content to user by analyze use a behavior and a preference itself to recommended itself items that users are most likely to join, enjoy, improve user experience and engagement. The last one is the conclusion. The conclusion of the Navy bias is the powerful classification algorithms. Navy is a powerful, widely and used classification model in machine learning. Key points: the probability-based algorithm. Navy bias is grounded in probability theory and bias theorem. It calculates the likelihood of the data point belonging to the class based on these features and select the class with the highest probability. Simplicity and efficiency. Despite the bring of the data and the easy to implement, the very efficient, particularly with the large and dataset, the text heavy application. The datasets and the text heavy application, widely used application, maybe biases are applied in a many real world scenario, such as the email spam detection, sentiment analysis, document classification, medical diagnosis, recommendation system. Surprisingly accurate even when the naive assumption of the features independent, that algorithms often performs better than the expect in a practical application. Take this make it a reliable and a popular choice in a machine learning. In short, the Navy bias is combines simplicity, speed, and effectiveness, making it an excellent algorithm for a classification task, especially when the working with the text on large data. It is a great starting points for everyone learning machine learning and developing practical solution that require fast, accurate classification. Okay.